Buck was down here in Nashville last week. We did a fun event out in Franklin called the West Fest. Great band, several thousand people out. And I was emceeing, I was introducing the different bands. And there was an area under a tent that had an open bar. And Buck saw me come up with this experiment. The cooler was stocked with all different kinds of beer. And Bud Light, Mick Ultra, and Yingling were the three most common. I think there were a few ranch waters also thrown in out there. And at 6:30 or so, I opened that cooler to get myself a drink. And I told Buck, I said, I bet you by 9:45, when it gets dark here, and this event's been going on for a while, I bet you that only Bud Light will be left in this cooler. People will all choose to get other beers to avoid having a Bud Light in their hand. I posted these videos in the last couple of hours at Twitter, at Clay Travis. Buck, we've talked about Bud Light and the fact that 26% decline, according to Beer Business Daily, I think it was, overall rejection of Bud Light that's occurring. I think it's actually getting worse now because the Bud Light brand has become so toxic that guys think if I'm even drinking a Bud Light now, I'm going to get made fun of by my friends.
Yep.
Yes. And I think this is now, I don't even know how Bud Light comes back from this because this was a tailgate scene, and people out there know I go around and have covered college football for a long time and gotten to spend a lot of time at tailgates everywhere. I think that this football season that's coming up, especially in the SEC and the Big 12 and the Southern ACC schools, I think no one's going to have Bud Light at their tailgates, Buck. I think that they are legitimately, by and large, not going to buy it because it's the equivalent of having like a Zima in your hand back in the day. It's
whoa. Hey, Clay.
Does Zima still exist?
They brought it back because some of us who love the 90s and were drinking underage, apparently, thought that Zima was a fabulous beverage at its time. They actually started making it. It was like resurrected as part of 90s nostalgia. I still remember those commercials. So I don't know about this shade you're throwing towards Zima right now.
I just know there were a lot of guys that were mocked for drinking Zima.
Hey, what's up? Clay Travis, Buck Sexton. We appreciate you hanging out on our YouTube page.
Please like and subscribe. Leave us some comments below.
People would get mocked for drinking light beer in general, and then they smartly went Miller Lite, Coors Light, Bud Light. They went and they marketed light beer to men aggressively. And I just after this little experiment, and I'm not claiming that it's anything other than anecdotal, but in response, if you go into Twitter and look at that, you can see people responding and saying, hey, at my golf course, the cart girls aren't even putting Bud Light on the golf cart anymore because when they're pulling up to sell beers, guys are making fun of each other so much for drinking a Bud Light that they just stopped stocking it on the golf course, for the cart girls going around, which is really kind of interesting. I think this is happening everywhere.
What is the thing that everyone drinks? The seltzer that became so super popular, the alcoholic seltzer,
White Claw.
White Claws, yes. Those took over the world for a few years there. And every generation gets in. I'm just going to say this right now, okay? For everyone out there, every generation has their new version of basically some kind of a spritzer, and it's this new brand.
Are you still trying to defend Zima?
Excuse me, sir. Everyone has their spritzer of their generation, and, you can come up with new versions of it, but it's just funny. Everyone's like, oh, look, I've discovered this amazing thing called a White Claw. Yeah, White Claw is Zima with little fruit flavor thrown in there. It's the same thing.
I would not have expected you to be such an avowed spokesperson for Zima.
I don't even really drink, but I do, it's true.
As has arisen. But for this minor experiment, it would suggest that the branding of Bud Light, because even when I was going to get beers for people, Buck, they would say anything but a Bud Light. What do you want to drink? I'm fine. Any beer but a Bud Light. Never heard that in my whole life. And I understand we got a bunch of emails after from some of our beer drinkers out there angry at me. One guy emailed in and he said, "I'd hate for you to lose listeners over your opinion over the difference between Coors Light and Miller Lite." Let me just tell you this, all right? If anybody out there, after 2 years of me giving opinions on everything under the sun, Buck, was like, I was all in on Clay and Buck. And then Clay said there's not that much difference between Bud Light, Miller Lite, and Coors Light, and most of you couldn't tell the difference if you were at a game and you had a hot dog and you had an unlabeled beer in your hand between those three. That was the moment where I thought to myself, I can't listen to this guy anymore. He's gone too far. I don't think there's a single person in America who would be in that camp.
Do you think, first of all, we're still getting emails about that, Clay. So
people are still fired up about, the Miller Lite people are fired up that I could ever believe that Miller Lite and Coors Light are pretty similar in taste, but okay.
The Miller Lite Brigade comes after you, sir. You know what I mean? They defend their barley and hops, very much so. Isn't that what's in beer? So, that's one part of this. But also, is there any way that this can be turned around? I'm fascinated by this. It almost feels like they're going to have to just rebrand whatever they were selling as Bud Light as something else. But then does that seem like it's such a retreat that people have been pointing this out. InBev, Brazilian company, buys Anheuser-Busch. It's Anheuser-Busch InBev now. It's a global conglomerate that sells dozens and dozens of different, drinks all over the world, right? So they're saying, well, this isn't going to bankrupt Anheuser-Busch InBev. That is true, obviously. It's not even necessarily going to hurt the stock price. That is also true right now. We'll see what happens when the second quarter earnings are in. But for Bud Light specifically, and people that rely on Bud Light as distributors and people that are tied more to this brand, is the brand made toxic now to its base in a way where it is actually irreparable? You know what I mean? Is this something that they can't fix?
You can fix anything, I think, over time. I think this is going to be a multi-year issue for them now because I don't see it fading away quickly. And I was thinking about this when we were at the tailgate and I was looking. I mean, again, this was an area where you could just select any beer, right? And that's kind of like a tailgate scene. And at college football or NFL games or places where largely male audiences are consuming beverages, I think a ton of dudes out there are going to be like, okay, I got to go buy, 96 beers this weekend, right? Because all the guys are coming. We're going to tailgate, I don't know, for the Kansas City Chiefs game or Miami Dolphins game or San Francisco 49ers, whatever it is, using NFL. And certainly Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12. I would put myself up against anybody on knowledge of the, tailgate scene cultures of college football, right? I think dudes are not buying Bud Light. And I think, to your point, some of them will buy other Anheuser-Busch products. For instance, in the video that I posted, I reach in, I hold up a Mick Ultra. It's also a Budweiser product. But, Buck, they marketed Mick Ultra as the healthy beer, right? Because it has like 90 calories or whatever it is. So if you're trying to stay in shape, but you also like beer, what do they do with the television commercials? It's like a good-looking guy and a good-looking girl are running against each other, like athletically training. And then at the end, they have a Mick Ultra, right? Because it's got 90 calories as opposed to, I think average beer has like 150, 160 calories, whatever it is. What is the Bud Light lane? What is their marketing lane now that they have been identified as the beer for loser dudes? That's their brand now. If you are a dude and you are drinking a Bud Light, and that was probably 80%, 75% of their audience to begin with, now your buddies are going to be like, hey, look at Jimmy, the loser. He's got a Bud Light. And you'll just drink a Coors Light or a Miller Light instead.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be like, hey, we're all supposed to go jet skiing together, but then, Tommy over here was being a bit of a Bud Light drinker. It's not good. Not
a good look. I mean, it's a modern day, despite Buck's affinity for the brand, it's a modern day Zima.
Some of the Zima drinkers out there, please back me up on this one. A hard seltzer is not in the same category as Bud Light.